I never imagined moving back into my old house would result in much more than a calm, uneventful summer. I had just turned 24, graduated from college, and was unclear of my next steps. My father David and his new wife Catherine had offered me to stay until I worked things out. They suggested it would allow me to save some money before deciding what I wanted to do next. Catherine was 65 years old, but you wouldn't know it from her appearance. She exuded youthful vitality, a welcoming grin, and a manner of putting everyone around her at ease. I didn't know Catherine very well. She married my father a few years ago after my mother died, and they appeared to be happy together, so I was pleased for him. Catherine was always thoughtful, inquiring about my day and making sure I had all I needed. It felt uncomfortable having her around, but she made my father happy, and that was all that counted to me. One Friday night, I was up late in my room, looking through job postings on my laptop. The house was silent. My father was already asleep, and I was concerned about my future, fearing that I'd be stuck here with no direction. I groaned, resting back in my chair, when I heard a faint knock on the door. "Jake, are you still awake?" Catherine's voice came through the door, sweet and calming. "Yeah, I'm awake. Come in." I called back and closed my laptop. Catherine opened the door and came inside wearing a light nightgown that floated around her like a gentle breeze. Her hair was loose, cascading down her shoulders, and she seemed more calm than I'd ever seen her before. She smiled at me, her eyes compassionate. "I thought I heard you moving around in here and couldn't sleep." I shrugged, trying to play it calm while wondering about, as previously stated, it is common to feel abandoned after graduating from college. Looking at her, I noticed how the light from the hallway highlighted the lines on her face and the years of experience and life she had. She had a certain grace, a beauty that was different from the girls my age. I felt a strange comfort in her presence. "Your dad and I were talking earlier," she said softly, "and we both agree that you have plenty of time to figure things out. You don't need to rush into anything." I nodded, appreciating her words, but there was something in the way she looked. "Catherine, it's excellent to hear that my voice was calmer than I had intended." She grinned again. Her hand reached out to touch my arm. Her touch was kind, but it sent a chill down my spine. "Jake, you remind me so much of your father when he was younger, so full of potential and so strong." I felt a blush rise to my cheeks. "I guess I never thought of it that way." She nodded, her gaze not leaving mine. "Yes, you do, and I believe you'll find your way just as he did." There was a pause, a stillness weighted with unspoken words. I wasn't sure what to say. She asked softly, hardly a whisper, "What are you doing?" I hesitated, my heart racing in my chest. "I don't know." I couldn't find the words to convey how I felt. Confusion, yearning, and connection. She stared at me. Her eyes searched mine, which was unexpected. She continued, her voice shaking slightly. "But I feel it as well, this connection between us. I don't know what it means, but I can't deny it." I swallowed hard, my thoughts racing. This was my stepmother, Catherine, who was married to my father. This was wrong, right? But when I looked at her and the way her eyes sparkled in the faint light, I couldn't bring myself to go away. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I explained, my voice quivering, "but I can't stop thinking about you." Catherine, she closed her eyes and drew a big breath. "Jake, this is so confusing. I adore your father, but you have awakened something in me that I thought was gone. Something I can't ignore." My hand tightened over hers, and my head whirled with emotions. "What do we do?" I inquired, feeling lost and yearning for an answer. She opened her eyes and looked at me with a mixture of despair and longing. I'm not sure what she admitted. All I know is that I can't pretend this isn't occurring, but we need to be careful. "Jake, we can't allow this to damage your father and destroy everything." I nodded and felt a lump in my throat. "I don't want to hurt him or you, but I can't deny how I feel." She leaned closer, her speech barely audible. "Perhaps we should take some time to find out what this means and whether it is genuine or just confusion." I nodded again. My heart aches. Perhaps this is a good idea. We sat there in quiet for a long time, our hands still locked together, the weight of our position weighing heavily on us. I knew that whatever occurred next would be different. We had crossed a boundary and could not go back. Catherine rose up, her hand slipping away from mine. We should get some sleep, she suggested quietly. We'll chat more. David, sorry, okay. I responded, my voice full of sorrow. She turned to leave but stopped at the door to glance back at me. Good night. Jake, good night, she whispered, her voice filled with anguish that resonated in my heart. Catherine, I responded, watching as she shut the door behind her. I sat in the dark, my mind racing and my heart heavy. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. My life was about to alter in ways I couldn't have imagined, and as much as that worried me, a part of me couldn't wait to see where this new path would lead. After Catherine departed, the solitude in my room was overwhelming, and I felt a mixture of shame, uncertainty, and a pull toward something I knew I should be outraged with myself for ever considering any of this, but I wasn't. I had not felt this alive in a long time. The next morning, I tried to go about my day as if nothing had happened. I joined Catherine and my father for breakfast, chatting about the weather and my job search. My father was in good humor, discussing his weekend plans, blissfully unaware of the tension between Catherine and me. I took a glance at Catherine, who appeared tranquil. Her grin was as effortless as always, but her eyes met mine, and I knew she was thinking about last night, just like me. After breakfast, my father left to perform some errands, leaving Catherine and me alone in the house. I was in my room, pretending to search for employment online, but I couldn't concentrate. My thoughts kept returning to Catherine, the way her hand felt in mine, and the way she looked at me. A knock on my door stopped my thoughts. I recognized who it was before I even spoke. Come in, I urged, sounding unduly excited. Catherine walked in, closed the door behind her, and looked at me. Her expression is serious. Jake, we need to chat. I nodded, my heart pounding. I know I had been thinking about it all morning. She sat on the edge of my bed, exactly as she had the night before. I've been thinking about us and what occurred, and I'm really perplexed. Part of me feels guilty, but the other part can't stop thinking about you. I felt relieved to hear I wasn't alone in feeling this way, and I said I knew it was terrible. Catherine, you are my stepmother and father. He doesn't deserve it, yet I can't help but be drawn to you. There's something between us, and I'm sure you feel it too. She stared at me. Her eyes were filled with a combination of melancholy and longing. I do, Jake, but I don't want to upset David. He's a nice man who has been so good to me. I don't want to betray him, but I also can't lie to myself about how I believe this connection between us is genuine. I walked closer to Catherine, sitting beside her on the bed. I do not want to hurt anyone, but I can't deny my feelings, and we need to figure out what this means for both of us. She stared down at Jake, her fingers fiddling with the edge of her dress. I'm not sure what the future holds, if this is simply a phase or something more, but I know I care about you more than I should, and I can't keep pretending otherwise. I stretched out again, grasping her hand in mine, and this time she didn't back away. Let us take it one step at a time. I proposed that we don't have to figure out everything right now. Let's just see where this goes. Be honest with each other and take it easy. We owe that to Dad and ourselves. She gazed up at me. Her eyes searched mine. Do you really believe we can do that? Keep whatever this is from your father. I nodded, but I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince her or myself that we'd have to wait at least until we knew what this was. I do not wish to cause any grief. Catherine, I can't ignore, okay, Jake, we'll take it slowly and see where it goes. But we have to be careful if your father finds out. I realize I spoke rapidly. I'll be careful, I promise. Catherine and I spent the following 3 weeks navigating this new, uncharted territory. After my father had gone to bed, we stayed up late talking together. We took lengthy walks, just the two of us, talking about everything and nothing. The tension between us was always present, an undercurrent that we couldn't ignore. We hadn't crossed any new borders, but each touch and glance seemed like a step closer to something we both knew could alter. I asked in a hushed voice, and she stared at me. Her eyes reflected the starlight. What do you mean if you hadn't married my father? Do you think we would have ended up differently? She smiled softly, with a tinge of sadness in her eyes. Jake's life is full of what-ifs, but I'm with you right now, and that's all that counts. I stretched out to take her hand. "I'm delighted you're here, Catherine. I'm not sure what I'd do without you." She squeezed my palm, and her touch was warm and soothing. "I'm here. Jake and I are not going anywhere while we sit there under the stars. I know that whatever happens, we will face it together." It wasn't going to be easy. There would be obstacles, doubts, and maybe even regrets. But for now we had each other, and that was enough in the weeks that followed. Catherine and I continued to explore our feelings cautiously, navigating the thin line we were walking. We kept our relationship secret, careful not to let my dad or anyone else see the bond growing between us. It was a delicate balance that required constant vigilance and honesty, and then one day everything changed. It was a Saturday afternoon, and my father was out playing golf with his friends. Catherine and I were in the living room talking about my plans to move out. "David, it's not what it seems," Catherine began, but my father didn't listen. "How long has it been going on?" he yelled, his eyes burning. "How long have you been creeping behind my back?" "Dad, please let us explain." I attempted to calm him down, but he refused to listen, so he stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Catherine and I stood there, startled by what had just happened. The secret we had worked so hard to protect was out, and there was no going back. I realized we had passed a line that we couldn't reverse. The consequences of this would be disastrous not only for Catherine and me but also for my father. In the days that followed, the house was tense, and my father scarcely spoke to either of us, his pain and anger evident. Catherine tried to explain to him, but he refused to listen. I could see the sorrow in his eyes, the betrayal he felt, and it tore me apart to know that I had caused it. I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't stay in the house with the tension, rage, and hurt that filled every room. I packed my bags and told my father I was leaving. He didn't say much, just nodded his eyes hard. Catherine looked distraught, but she didn't try to stop me. She realized it was for the better as I went out the door. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't stay. I needed to find my own way to figure out who I was and what I wanted. As much as I cared for Catherine, I knew that our relationship had been built on a foundation of secrets and lies. It wasn't fair to my father or to us. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it. I knew there would be challenges, but I also knew that I would never forget the lessons. Life was chaotic, confusing, and full of unexpected turns, but it was also beautiful, and I was prepared for whatever happened next.